From a woman who set the dinner table with her ex's cooked remains, to a man who turned his victims into street food, this is ranking the 15 craziest cannibals in history. And trust me, it only gets worse from here. If there was an award for most psychotic breakup ever, Katherine Knight would be in the Hall of Fame. This Australian woman wasn't just any jealous ex. She was a professional slaughterhouse worker who took her skills way too seriously at home. Knight's final relationship was with John Price, and let's just say, he probably regretted swiping right. After a nasty argument, she waited until he was asleep, and then stabbed him 37 times. Now, that's already horrifying, but Katherine wasn't done. She skinned him like a deer and hung his skin on a meat hook in their house, like some kind of nightmarish Home Depot project. But the worst part? She cooked his flesh, plated it up with veggies, and set the table for his children. Yeah, she planned a family dinner. Luckily, the police showed up before anyone could take a bite. But imagine the therapy bills for those kids. Knight was the first woman in Australia sentenced to life without parole, proving that if you're going to be this insane, society will make sure you never see a kitchen knife again. S tier. Not because she's a legend, because she's a walking horror movie. Florida is already known for some wild stories, but Rudy Eugene took Florida Man to a whole new level of nightmare fuel. On May 26, 2012, in the scorching Miami heat, Eugene was walking around completely naked, which, let's be honest, isn't that unusual. But what happened next turned the entire world's stomach. Out of nowhere, he attacked a homeless man, Ronald Papo, and began eating his face. Not metaphorically, literally ripping chunks of flesh off with his teeth. A witness called the police, and when they arrived, they were met with a real-life horror movie. Eugene was on top of Papo, growling like an animal, chewing off his nose, lips, and eyeballs. Even after police ordered him to stop, Eugene just looked up with a mouthful of flesh and went back to eating. At this point, the police had no choice but to shoot him, and guess what? He tanked the first bullet and kept going. It took 4 more shots to finally put him down. Initially, authorities believed Eugene was on bath salts, a drug linked to bizarre, violent behavior. But toxicology reports later found nothing except marijuana. So what made him do it? A psychotic break? Supernatural zombie instincts? No one knows. But Papo miraculously survived the attack, though he lost 80% of his face. If you're gonna be a cannibal, at least season the meat first. Eating human flesh live on the streets is diabolical. F tier.
Fucking diabolical.
When you think of a celebrity chef, you picture someone making gourmet dishes, not a real-life Hannibal Lecter auditioning for Hell's Kitchen. But Anthony Morley, a former trained chef, decided one night that his culinary expertise needed a human touch. Morley was in a relationship with Damien Oldfield, a magazine worker who had no idea he was about to become the worst meal of the decade. One night, after a seemingly normal evening, Morley suddenly snapped. He stabbed Oldfield over 20 times, slit his throat, and then decided to go full Gordon Ramsay. Yes, he cut flesh from Oldfield's chest and thigh, pan-fried it with olive oil and herbs, and took a bite. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. Instead of running away, Morley put on a white robe covered in blood and calmly walked to a nearby kebab shop, where he casually asked for the police to be called. Imagine you're just trying to get a late-night kebab and a guy covered in blood like he's fresh off a Game of Thrones battle walks in. The police arrived, found Oldfield's remains at Morley's house, and arrested him immediately. At trial, he claimed he had a sudden breakdown, but the court wasn't buying it. He was sentenced to life in prison, and thankfully, no restaurant has dared to hire him since. He's not even the worst cannibal on this list, but considering his actual chef skills, he really should have done better and made a Michelin star dish. D tier. And why don't you let us cook in the YouTube algorithm by hitting subscribe? Don't worry, we're cooking content, not human flesh. Most bus rides are just boring commutes, but for the passengers of Greyhound Bus 1170, this one turned into a real-life horror movie. On July 30th, 2008, Vince Lee, a seemingly quiet and polite man, boarded a Greyhound bus in Canada, heading towards Winnipeg. Everything seemed normal, until, without warning, he pulled out a knife and started stabbing the man sitting next to him, Tim McLean. McLean, a 22-year-old carnival worker, had no chance to escape. Lee stabbed him dozens of times as terrified passengers screamed and fled the bus. But it gets worse. After McClane was dead, Lee decapitated him and held his severed head up like a trophy. Then, while the police stood outside in shock, he started eating pieces of McClane's flesh. Let me repeat that. He snacked on the guy mid-crime scene. The standoff lasted for hours before Lee was finally arrested. But here's the twist. He was found not criminally responsible due to schizophrenia. And guess what? He was released in 2017. Yep, he's walking around free today under a new name. So maybe think twice before sitting next to a quiet guy on public transport. If your crime is so horrific, it makes people afraid of buses, you've earned your spot. S tier. Some families open restaurants together. Jorge Beltrán Negromonte and his wife. They cooked people and sold them as street food. This Brazilian couple, along with their mistress, formed what can only be described as the worst food truck concept in history. They lured young women to their home under the promise of employment. Once inside, they killed them, butchered their bodies, and made human-filled pastries, which they sold to their neighbors. Now, this is already insane, but it gets even darker. They didn't just eat their victims, they fed the meat to their 5-year-old daughter. Yeah, imagine finding out your childhood diet consisted of people. Authorities only caught them when one victim's missing child led police to their home. Inside, they found gruesome diaries written by Jorge, detailing every kill like a cookbook from hell. The trio was sentenced to decades in prison, but the mental scars they left on their town, that's forever. Feeding human meat to your own kid and turning your crimes into a business plan? That's a new level of twisted. A tier. You think that's the worst we've got? Oh no. You need to stick around until the end to see the absolute GOAT of cannibal horror. Someone so twisted they didn't just eat people, they made children eat themselves. Yeah, it gets that bad. Keep watching. If horror movies needed a real-life villain, Albert Fish would be the final boss of nightmares. This guy wasn't just a cannibal, he was a sadistic predator who took pleasure in pure suffering. Born in 1870, Fish was already off the rails by childhood. He grew up in an orphanage where he was routinely beaten and abused. But instead of fearing pain, he started enjoying it. By the time he was an adult, he had developed a disturbing obsession with self-harm, including shoving needles into his own pelvis. Yes, they found x-rays full of them after his arrest. But self-inflicted pain wasn't enough. He turned to abducting, torturing, and eating children. Fish claimed to have killed over 100 victims, but the one that made him infamous was 10-year-old Grace Budd. He lured her away under the pretense of taking her to a birthday party, but instead, he murdered, cooked, and ate her. To make things worse, he wrote a letter to her family, graphically describing what he had done. His crimes were so gruesome that even hardened detectives had nightmares about him. He was eventually caught and sentenced to death by electric chair. When asked about his execution, he allegedly said, "This will be the supreme thrill of my life." His twisted mind saw the chair as entertainment. On January 16, 1936, the switch was flipped. It reportedly took 2 jolts to kill him because his body was full of metal needles. This guy will make the devil himself uncomfortable and belong at the top. S tier. Hit subscribe, or you might just get a mystery dinner invite you really don't want to accept. Most grandmas spend their retirement baking cookies or knitting sweaters, but Tamara Samsonova? She preferred murder and maybe a little cannibalism. This Russian woman, nicknamed the Granny Ripper, was your sweet old lady on the outside, but a real-life horror villain on the inside. Over the years, people around her kept mysteriously disappearing. Her husband? Gone without a trace. Her tenants? Vanished. Even her close friends started going missing. The truth came out in 2015, when police discovered a bag full of human body parts near her apartment complex. Inside her home, they found her diary, which detailed gruesome murders written in multiple languages, as if she was keeping a creepy travelogue of her crimes. She allegedly poisoned, dismembered, and possibly ate her victims. Though no official proof of cannibalism was found, her diary made references to eating lungs and other organs. Not exactly the tea party you'd expect from someone's grandma. She was arrested, and when questioned, she smiled in court and even blew kisses, because sure, nothing screams innocence like acting like you're on a reality show. While she's definitely creepy, the lack of confirmed cannibalism keeps her off the top levels. C tier. Imagine you check into a cheap motel, hoping for a place to sleep, maybe a free breakfast. What you don't expect is your motel neighbor cooking as guest. In 2014, a woman checked into a guest house in Wales only to meet a very hungry Matthew Williams. Williams had just gotten out of prison, and within hours of meeting her, he brutally attacked, killed, and started eating her face. When the hotel staff heard horrific screams, they burst into the room, only to find Williams mid-meal. Police were called immediately, but Williams was so violent and uncontrollable that officers had to tase him multiple times. He died shortly after, but at that point, there wasn't much left to save. What makes this case especially disturbing is that no one knows why he did it. There were no drugs in his system, and he had no history of cannibalism before this. It was a one-time event, but that's one time too many. While it was horrifying, it felt like a random psychotic break, not a planned or repeated act of cannibalism. D tier. Nikolai Jumagaliev isn't just one of the worst cannibals in history, he's also one of the strangest. Born in Kazakhstan, this guy looked like your average mustache man. Except for one detail, his metal teeth. Yep, he had shiny silver dentures that he specifically designed to chew human flesh more efficiently. His killing spree began in the late 1970s when he targeted women, murdered them, and then cooked their remains. But he didn't just eat them alone. He allegedly served human meat to his friends at dinner parties without telling them. Imagine sitting at his house thinking you're eating some classic Kazakh dish, only to find out you were the main course. Authorities finally caught him when he killed a woman in front of his friends. When police searched his home, they found human remains everywhere, including inside his refrigerator. And here's the twist. He was declared insane and sent to a psychiatric hospital. But in 1991, he somehow escaped and disappeared for years. He was eventually recaptured in 1995, but the fact that he was just roaming free for that long? Terrifying. Metal teeth plus serving human meat at dinner parties? That's a next level kind of disturbing. A tier. Go on and hit subscribe, or you might as well end up at a dinner party where you're the main dish. Most rappers brag about money, fame, and street life. Antron Singleton? He rapped about eating people. And then actually did it. Better known as Big Lurch, Singleton was an underground rapper from Texas who had a promising career ahead of him. That was until he went on a drug-fueled rampage that ended in one of the most horrifying crimes in hip-hop history. In 2002, Singleton took a massive dose of PCP, a drug known for causing violent hallucinations. What followed was pure horror. He attacked his roommate, Tynesha Isais, brutally killed her, and then began eating parts of her face and lungs. When police found him wandering the streets completely naked, his mouth was covered in blood, and he was muttering about the devil. The autopsy confirmed that flesh was missing from her body, and worst of all, they found human meat in Singleton's stomach. His career was obviously over, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But to this day, he insists that PCP made him do it. Which might be true, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying. He wasn't actually a serial killer, but one bad drug trip made him a walking horror story. C tier. Most cannibals eat other people, but Rick Gibson, he took self-love to a whole new level. This British-Canadian artist wasn't a killer, but he made cannibalism his personal project. Gibson believed that eating human flesh should be legal, and he decided to prove his point in the most disturbing way possible. In 1988, he publicly ate human flesh on a busy street in London. But where did he get it? From a medical donor who willingly gave him pieces of their skin. Yes, this was legal. But Gibson wasn't satisfied with just one snack. He went on to eat human testicles in Vancouver, also from a donor, and even made earrings out of human fetuses. The man was basically a one-man horror museum, and yet he never committed a crime. He simply believed cannibalism shouldn't be a taboo and went all in on proving it. He was definitely unsettling, but let's be honest, he wasn't murdering anyone. He was just too comfortable eating people. D tier. If there was an Olympics for getting away with murder, Issei Sagawa would have taken gold. Born in Japan, Sagawa was a privileged and highly intelligent man, but he had one problem. He really wanted to eat human flesh, and in 1981, he finally acted on it. While studying in Paris, he invited a Dutch classmate, Renee Hartevelt, to his apartment for dinner. But the real dinner was her. Sagawa shot her in the head, raped her corpse, and then began cutting off pieces of her body to eat. Over the next 2 days, he cooked and consumed parts of her breasts and thighs, describing the taste as melting tuna. First of all, it is gross. Second of all, why would you even say that? Eventually, he was caught while trying to dump the body, and here's where things get infuriating. He was declared insane and sent back to Japan, where after just 5 years in a psych ward, he was released. Yes, this man walked free and even became a weird celebrity, appearing on TV shows, writing books, and even becoming a food critic. If you literally eat someone and get famous instead of punished, that's insane. S tier. A cannibal got famous for what he did and walked free. And yet, you're denying me a subscription for just letting you know about it? Make it make sense and hit the subscribe. Most cannibals hunt their victims. Armin Meiwes? He posted a personal ad looking for someone to voluntarily be eaten. In 2001, this German IT technician took to the dark web, posting an ad that basically said, "Looking for a man to be killed and eaten. Serious inquiries only." And the craziest part is, someone actually replied. His willing victim, Bernd Brandes, wasn't just okay with it. He was excited. The two met in Meiwes' house, and after some pre-dinner activities, Meiwes amputated Brandy's body parts and the two tried to eat it together. When that didn't go well, Meiwes fully killed him, butchered the body, and stored over 40 pounds of human meat in his freezer. He ate it over the next 10 months, describing it as like pork, but stronger. Can someone please stop these cannibals from doing food reviews? He was eventually caught after posting online again, looking for a second meal. At trial, he argued it wasn't murder because the victim consented. But Germany disagreed and he got life in prison. Finding a volunteer is a different level of insanity. A tier. You can't talk about cannibalism without mentioning Jeffrey Dahmer. This guy was so infamous, they made a Netflix series about him. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer lured men into his apartment, killed them, and then did every horrifying thing imaginable to their bodies. He didn't just kill, he experimented. He tried to turn victims into zombies, preserve skulls and skeletons, and yes, he ate them. Dahmer's freezer looked like a butcher shop from hell with bags of human meat and preserved organs. He later confessed that eating his victims made him feel like they were a part of him forever. The only reason he was caught? One victim escaped, ran to the police, and led them straight to Dahmer's apartment. When the cops entered, they found photos of dismembered bodies, human skulls, and the world's worst kitchen supplies. Dahmer was sentenced to 16 life terms, but didn't last long in prison. Another inmate killed him in 1994. Even among serial killers, Dahmer was considered too evil to exist. If you're so disturbing that even prisoners can't stand you, you definitely belong in S tier. We've seen cannibal chefs, zombie-like killers, and even a dude who willingly signed up to be someone's dinner. But what if I told you that none of them were the worst? We've seen solo cannibals, crazy duos, and entire families, but Klara Mauerova takes the GOAT tier because she literally started a child-torturing, cannibalistic cult. In 2007, Czech police uncovered a crime so disturbing it shocked even seasoned investigators. Klara Mauerova, a deeply religious woman, believed she was fulfilling a divine prophecy. She and her cult, called the Grail Movement, believed that torturing children purified their souls. Her own two 8-year-old and 10-year-old sons, Andre and Jakob, were locked in a cage, starved, burned, and in the worst twist, forced to eat their own flesh. The crime was discovered by accident when a neighbor's baby monitor picked up a live feed of the boys being tortured. Police raided the house, and what they found was beyond horrifying. Mauerova and several cult members were arrested. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison, which honestly feels too short for something this evil. Child sacrificing cults? Yeah, that's a new level of pure nightmare fuel. definitely GOAT tier. You've just survived 15 of the most horrifying cannibals in history. But if you thought this was the worst humanity had to offer, think again. Some people didn't just eat their victims. They wiped out entire populations, tortured for fun, and rewrote history in blood. Check out the video we made ranking the most evil humans in history, because trust me, there are monsters out there worse than cannibals.